And my office, the Human Rights Office, is here to do everything for Bangladesh to succeed in this regard. Students conveyed to me that they had no choice but to take to the streets, as there was no outlet through the state's mechanism for their concerns to be heard. To restore social cohesion and trust in the institutions of the state, it will be crucial to rebuild the civic space that was progressively strangled in recent years. This will require reforming repressive laws as well as state institutions that have been in the habit of stifling dissent. Old habits die hard. Only systemic change will ensure that the freedom of expression, of association and peaceful assembly and the right to political participation are respected. I welcome steps taken to repeal the Cybersecurity Act and to withdraw old cases of speech crimes under this law and the Digital Security Act. An inclusive approach where every voice is heard and valued, irrespective of class, gender, race, political ideology, identity or religion, will be key, reflecting the aspirations and diversity of the movement that sparked this transition. Women are at the heart of social justice movements, including the protests in July, and I pay tribute to them. They must be at the forefront during the transition and beyond. Women need to be visible, particularly in leadership and decision-making positions. The participation of ethnic and structures, as well as of indigenous peoples, is also crucial. Statements that reinforce Bangladesh's commitment to human rights, to social justice and accountability, that acknowledge the need for comprehensive reform in various institutions, including law enforcement, as well as the need to address economic inequalities. The rapid establishment of commissioners to recommend reforms in the judiciary, the election system, the administration, the police, the constitution, and an anti-corruption commission is commendable. And I understand further commissions are being formed on health, media, labor rights, and women's affairs. In my discussions today with several of the commissioners, we discussed the importance of trust building, inclusivity, and the lessons that Bangladesh can draw from experiences in other countries that have grappled with similar issues. All these reforms could be a powerful step towards easing decades of intense political division in the country and curbing the patronage politics that have weakened its democratic foundations. The pursuit of justice for the brutal violence against protesters and other people, including children, killed and seriously wounded in July and August is a priority. Today I visited Nitol Hospital, where some of the students who were shot while participating in protests in July are still undergoing treatment, often requiring multiple surgeries. After any period of repression, upheaval and violence, there needs to be a national process of truth and healing to move forward. With so many cases to manage from just the recent past, criminal justice can only provide part of the answer. The legitimate pain and anger of victims, their loved ones, and society at large requires a comprehensive approach that includes fair criminal trials, truth-seeking processes, reparations for victims, and initiatives to memorialize and preserve the history. The graffiti art around the protests and Dr. Yunus's visit to the site of a notorious secret detention facility, Ainagor, which will now be turned into a museum, are powerful contributions to memorialization. Beyond this, there must be guarantees of non-recurrence, measures to ensure that this can never happen again. I encourage national dialogue to design such a process, which can find inspiration in some of the initiatives already taken by students to ensure healing. I welcome Bangladesh's ratification of the Convention on Enforced Disappearances and the appointment of a commission of inquiry. I met with the commission, which needs full support both at the national level, but also at the international level. And it also needs sufficient time to clarify the fate of the victims and to support survivors. Criminal justice is key, but it is also crucial to ensure that charges are not brought in haste and that due process and fair trial standards are upheld throughout, including in the International Criminal Tribunal, in the International Crimes Tribunal. I found the interim government to be aware of the problems with the proceedings in the International Criminal Tribunal in the past. My office has provided comments on amending the ICT law to bring it into line with international standards and to ensure the right to fair trial and that justice is served without compromising due process. We will be looking at other ways that we can accompany and support this process. I hope there will also be a public discussion on the use of the death penalty in the future. My own view, informed by the law and by evidence, is clear. The death penalty should be relegated to the past. It is key that criminal cases are not filed against individuals solely on the basis of their previous political affiliation, including members or supporters of the Awami League. There are concerns that some charges are not founded on proper investigation, including a large number of murder charges against journalists. It is important not to repeat the patterns of the past. I welcome the creation by the interim government of a committee to look into this matter as a tool to address the possible proliferation of false cases. It is essential to prioritize due process. Transitions are always fraught with risks, and this is all the more pronounced for vulnerable groups. I commend the efforts made by students and others to protect minorities, and our fact-finding mission is investigating allegations of attacks against minorities between 5 and 15 August. It is vital that the authorities respond quickly to any incidents reported by conducting thorough investigations and holding perpetrators accountable. This will help build trust with minority communities, especially in light of troubling campaigns of misinformation and disinformation, as well as hate campaigns on social media. In my discussions with the interim authorities, I also expressed support and solidarity for Bangladesh in hosting Rohingya refugees. The situation in Rakhine State, which I'm sure all of you are following, is only growing worse. And I was told there are also new arrivals in Bangladesh. It is important to take a flexible and humanitarian approach and to ensure non-refoulement and the protection of new arrivals. It is critical to ensure security in the camps as well as access to livelihoods and education. I'm doing everything I can to galvanize the international community to focus on this issue, to support Bangladesh, and to step up the search for solutions. The interim government has inherited massive challenges on all fronts, including economic development, social, political, and the rule of law. Transitions are always complex, and expectations are high. Time is of the essence, but long-standing issues take time to resolve. The coming months will not be easy, but the spirit of the student protests and the momentum for lasting change must be sustained. Realizing the promise of human rights will require human rights as the compass. I was encouraged that in many of my discussions there was a call for enhanced support of my office, including through a strengthened presence. We look forward to concluding the discussions on the modalities of our enhanced presence in Bangladesh with the interim government. The invitation for my office to deploy a fact-finding mission on human rights violations in the context of protests, which took place in July and August this year, was an important initiative by the interim authorities. A stronger presence in Bangladesh will enable my office to accompany and support the transition process in this area and in other areas, including by offering advice on legal and institutional, economic and social reforms, transitional justice, reconciliation and healing. It is a priority for my office to support this dynamic, diverse country and its people through this period of transition and to do everything we can to help ensure the protection and promotion of human rights for everyone in Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. The statement will be emailed to you shortly. We can now take questions. My colleagues over on the right side will pass along the mic. We'll take 3 questions at a time, and then the High Commissioner will answer, then we can do another round.
So, Mr. Walker and Mr. Raman, you have just mentioned about the national healing process. So, do you think banning of political parties, especially you know that our village which has been accused of masculine and atrocities in their regime, so there is a demand for banning our village. And at the same time, the U.S. has made a statement saying that there is a freedom of movement and freedom of expression. So what is your take on this? Do you think it will be appropriate or not?
Hello, my name is Masud Karim. I work for the Juventus newspaper. My question is supplementary my previous colleague. There's a government, Indian government already banned the student wing of Sheikh Hasina's normally student wing, using the anti-terrorism act. So what is your response about the banning stuff? And in addition, there is a demand from the minority communities to investigate the attacks on the minorities by the UN officers. What is your response?
One more question. Is there anyone?
Yes,
Thank you. My name is Isha Sanuki. I work for BBC. Mr. Wari, you have visited several times in Bangladesh, and every time you meet the political party and civil society. My question is, can you make any difference in this meeting before and this time? Because as before.
Commissioner for Human Rights, but it is true, I have probably met many of you before because I used to work for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees as one of the deputies, and I've come many times to this country, including to Cox's Bazar. Of course, there's a huge difference. There is a huge difference in terms of openness, in terms of embracing human rights, discussing and debating. During this very difficult period of transition, that we can provide the support for the people of this country to be able to thrive in a way that marries both the human rights and the development approach. So yes, there is a huge difference. On the issue of the national healing process and how this relates to also political parties. I mean, the national healing process has always to be one that is homegrown. There needs to be national ownership. And for national healing to happen, you need accountability, you need justice. As I mentioned, you need truth-telling, you need memorialization, and you need, what I mentioned as well, the non-recurrence of the past. Non-recurrence of the past means that you are, when it comes to political participation, for example, that you are guided by the very clear provisions of human rights law. And human rights law is clear about it. It promotes the freedom of assembly, the freedom of association, the freedom of political participation. There are indeed in human rights law certain restrictions, but the threshold is extremely high. So I hope that when you go through this process, that human rights is your compass, and that's your guide as you go through this very difficult process of healing and transition. On the issue of anti-terrorism, look, there has been a lot of discussions about terrorism laws and the so-called war on terror. We have seen the consequences of it because, unfortunately, the labeling of terrorism has been done in a way that has often also included people who disagree, who are in political dissent. So let's not forget that Nelson Mandela, our big hero, who has been healing a whole country, was considered a terrorist by the South African apartheid regime. And unfortunately, we often see this resurgence of the use and the labeling of terrorism, as we saw in the past here as well, as something in order to quash dissent and discussion. And I think it's really important, again, to learn the lessons also from this country in the way that terrorism was used and to stifle dissent. Attacks on, you mentioned, reported attacks on minorities. As I mentioned in my remarks, it is part of our fact-finding as well. As I said, protection of minorities is absolutely key. It is part of the human rights framework, and we need to make sure that if these incidents are reported, that they are properly investigated. But let's also face it, unfortunately, in a climate that is often very chaotic, there's also a lot of misinformation and disinformation, which is all the more important to go to the facts, to identify the perpetrators and to bring them to justice.
If you'd like to ask a question, please put your hands up and my colleagues will pass the mic. Yeah? I will actually start, if you don't mind. I've received a question by email for the High Commissioner. How does the UN Human Rights Chief feel about the killing of individual members or supporters of the overthrown regime under the pretext of mob justice or mob atrocities? We'll take 2 more questions.
Hi, this is Sabiha. I work at AFP. I guess I have 2 or 3 questions. May I?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any plan to set up an office here? And if yes, do you have any time period in mind? This is my first question. And my second question is, as we know from our advisors through their interviews that you discussed about the issues that are concerning some about the city. So do you have any concerns or questions about fair trial, whether like they will be able to serve justice to all? Thank you.
What was the first one on ICT? No, say that.
Excellence over here. My name is Mohsen. I work for EKHON. My question regarding the office issue. I mean, there is a controversy in the Bangladesh regarding the office. So, I mean, why human rights look like it's a political tool all over the world? Why your office? I mean, this kind of office is not open, whether in UK or USA or in the Western world. Why does not happen? Why this, human rights issue is used to suppress the weak countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, or in African countries? Why? This is my first question. And second question, I mean, do you see any change in the human rights situation in Bangladesh? I mean, apart from the government, what changes was?
Look, first of all, I think there were this question about office. What I said is when a country goes through a transition period, as in many other situations around the world, we can support a transition period because human rights is part of governance. It's part of the new fabric of a society. It's part of a new social contract. And there is a lot of support out there. There are many experiences from around the world. They can be extremely useful. And to be honest, I heard both from human rights defenders, from the students, from the civil society members that I met, from the members of government, that there was a lot of requests. Can you share this with us? What do you think about that? How do you undertake, judicial reform? Do you have comments on this law? And so there is a huge need to provide that support. My function is to provide that support to countries that ask for it. And that's exactly what we're doing. I think we also need to look at human rights perhaps in a different way. Because there is, unfortunately, a lot of misinformation also about human rights. Some see it as a Western concept. Some see it only from the perspective that it's civil and political. Some see it as something that is maybe an imposition. But, if I look at this country, well, first of all, the history of this country is rife with human rights and social movements on so many fronts, coming to women's labor movements, what you did in order to, also the last couple of months. I mean, it was about freedom, and it was a cry for freedom, and human rights was part and parcel of what students were saying and were clamoring for. And I think, so human rights is not an issue of one part of the world. It is an issue that is truly universal, which is why you have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights adopted 75 years ago by all member states and reiterated again and again and again. By the way, I have a presence in about 100 countries, including in the Western world. For instance, we have a regional office in Brussels. We have an office, of course, an office in New York. So we have office presences. The problem that I have is that I don't get enough financing. I wish I could have an office everywhere, but unfortunately I don't get the funding. So as a result, we have to prioritize. And I want to prioritize precisely the situations where there is most need. And yes, transitions are often they are what they are. They are difficult sometimes, and they need support from everyone who can provide that support. And that's the offer that I have made to the authorities here, to the society here. And as I said, there was a lot of interest, a lot of also embracing of it, and we need to honor that. That's my duty to the people of Bangladesh. The issue of ICT, yes, I think it's very clear from the perspective of human rights law, and if you look at the ICT and both in the way that the law was constructed and it was set up, there are issues of compliance with international human rights standards, and they need to be addressed. And both when it comes to fair trial, but also to due process guarantees. And it's really important to reform that. I have discussed it with the authorities. There was a very open mind to that. And that's often the problem. You have an interim administration that has not even been in office for not even 3 months. The expectations are extremely high. The changes need to be made are enormous. So we also need to, first of all, provide them the support that is required, but also exercise patience and manage our expectations. But law reform is absolutely critical when it comes to that. Then the issue of, you mentioned mob justice. Of course, violence committed by whoever commits it and hurts another human being, that obviously needs to have mob justice of any kind, and that's why you need the rule of law system to precisely that type of response, because otherwise violence begets violence, as we see in so many situations around the world. Yes, as I mentioned, when it comes to change, there is a very different Bangladesh that I'm discovering, and I'm very grateful for that.
We can do one more round of 3 questions. Can you hold the mic closer, please?
You have already mentioned something about justice and fair trial, but I have a question you have. That there have been incidents of abduction of accused defendants, and even this was in court cases in Bangladesh. And what percentage of how murder cases been tried. So how does the see this?
Hi, my name is Tazal Mahmoud. I work for Showing. There have been a lot of human rights violations in July and August, and mostly carried out by the police forces. But after taking in charge, this interim government has given immunity to all those police officers that have been killed. Do you support that? How do you see that? the police officers who had been killed, no cases to be filed against them. So how do you see? My first question. My second question is, if an office is established in Dhaka, so what would their scope of work would be?
Thank you. This is me, Ahmed Reza, and I'm working for a television named Jomuna. So my question is to you that you have a number of discussion with our advisor level, and you have a discussion with the chief advisor as well. So, and you talked with them about the human rights situation in Bangladesh. So my question is to you that do you have that kind of confidence to the interim government that they can solve the situation, or they can, heal the situation in a greater perspective? Thank you so much.
Look, on the first question, which was around filing of cases, as I mentioned also during my statement, I welcome very much that this was recognized as an issue, because of course we cannot have the filing of cases on charges that are not properly done, and it's therefore extremely important to resolve this. And there is I understand a commission that was set up precisely to address this issue. It's really important in such a period that we don't repeat the patterns of the past, that justice is properly served, which means it has to be properly investigated, and charges need to be brought against precisely those who have committed crimes, and then they are also entitled to fair trial and due process standards. And I understand this commission is currently looking into this, and I welcome that they have done this. Look, when it comes to any killings, they need to be investigated, irrespective of the perpetrator. That's very clear. I mean, all killings need to be investigated. That's what human rights demands, because we cannot allow killings to happen with impunity. Well, look, when it comes to a strengthened, enhanced support to Bangladesh from a human rights perspective, it means that it would obviously accompany the reform process, because all the areas of reform that are currently being undertaken, they all have a human rights component, be it the judicial reform, be it rule of law reform more generally, be it the issue of police reform, be it police reform means use of force. You know, when do you use of force? What is acceptable into human rights law? We have had many examples in many countries around the world where precisely this issue had to be regulated. It's also about how to conduct proper investigations, how to build national ownership, including when it comes to the national human rights institutions here. And so our task is really to provide enhanced support to this transition at this very critical juncture. And look, I have met some remarkable individuals over the last 2 days, and really I'm in awe for who I have met in this country. So I have full confidence in the resilience, in the creativity, in the spirit of the people, including the ones who currently lead it. I think it's also very important to bear in mind that transitions, as I mentioned, are often fragile, and they require a lot of support from everyone, both, of course, first and foremost by the people of Bangladesh, but also by the international community, and that has to be recognized, and I really call for that support, and that is also part of my mission here. It was a mission of solidarity, and it was a mission of support to Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.